Turf Talk with Drew Miller.
For this episode of Tiger Turf Talk, we host Mr. Andrew Greene of Greene Designs. Andrew is one of the leading golf course architects in the United States. He has worked on different courses from Shinnecock to Oakmont to Oak Hill, so many prestigious golf courses, to his latest work at Congressional, right down the road from us here in Oaksville at Brentsville, where we were hoping to visit at some point last year, but we're struck with COVID and we're unable to attend. But it's just so fascinating what he does and the different aspects of our industry and how it plays such a big role in what he does as an architect. From tee box to putting green, there are so many levels that we don't really understand, and this podcast does such a fantastic job of bringing all those things to light for all turfgrass managers, whether it's sports turf, golf course, landscape. There are so many aspects that we need to be clear and understand before we go forward with our practices, and understanding all the different components of just maintaining the turfgrass to better our spaces in this green industry. We learned different things that Mr. Greene has gone through, from being told that he was unable to pursue any interesting career in golf course architecture because he doesn't have a famous golf name or anything along those lines. But through his perseverance and his dedication to his passion, he truly showed our students what it takes to be successful, not only in this industry but in life, and to really have the knowledge of what it takes to not be good at something, but to be passionate as well as good at something that you are going to pursue in this life. We hope you enjoy the talk with Mr. Greene. We cannot thank him enough. He has been a big supporter of the program over the years, and it's been such an honor to have him on this podcast. We hope you enjoy this episode of Tiger Turf Talk. Good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to the 18th episode of Tiger Turf Talk. I'm your host, Drew Miller, with your co-host, Rylan Harris. Today, we have on a fantastic guest, probably one of the most interesting guests that we could possibly have on. It's Mr. Andrew Greene, golf course architect, well known throughout the industry. How are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks for having me.
Of course. Thank you for coming on. So I kind of want to just get into it. You're a part of one of the most unique portions of the turfgrass industry when it comes to being a golf course architect, with some of the greatest golfers out there like Arnold Palmer and architects like Robert Trent Jones. What has it been like to get to be a part of such a lucrative part of our industry, and how did you get there?
Yeah, well, it's kind of crazy. When I was a junior in high school, this was kind of a goal of mine. And a lot of people told me it was impossible. I didn't have a famous dad that played golf, and I'm not the world's greatest golfer. I can hold my own. But those are early on, and in, I guess, post-war architecture, most of the dominant architects had some connection to a famous golfer of some sort, whether it be a family. And so interviewing at Virginia Tech, looking at the turf program. My brother had attended Tech and had a degree in turf, a 4-year degree, and went to visit the advisor there and talked about what it might take to be a golf course architect. And he suggested that I really needed to look at landscape architecture. So I went across campus to the architecture school and talked to a gentleman by the name of Dean Bork. And he actually had been a golf course architect in his earlier life, working out of an office in Chicago. And his kind of, statement to me was that it was a very hard business to break into, and that it was hard to feel fulfilled because you end up kind of paying your dues for so long in the business to finally get somewhere that it can be tough and frustrating and something that you really have to persevere with. And I thought about it and I said, let's go do this. So I went to Virginia Tech. I was in the 5-year landscape architecture program. It's a mandatory 5-year program. The first year you were with all of the architecture students. So building architecture, industrial design, maybe some urban planning kind of people, a pretty wide breadth of design. We were all together as freshmen taking a lot of classes. And that was pretty interesting. And then ended up getting my 4-year turf degree in that 5-year period. Pretty dedicated student. I took 18 hours or more the whole way through to make it all happen. Just driven to do it. I'm sure looking back on it, my friends probably made pretty good fun of me. I'd dress in khakis and a golf shirt to class. I dressed the part, I guess. Maybe I was a little bit of a loser, but it's what I wanted to do. And
no
I worked
chance.
at,
There's no way you're a loser. Come on.
I don't know. Looking back on it, I guess I'm doing okay now. But
I'd say you're doing pretty well.
Yeah, right. So I'd worked in golf course maintenance growing up. I started actually as a cart boy, I guess, and picking driving range golf balls and loading bags out of cars and stuff, doing that local club. And that just really wasn't for me. I loved golf course maintenance way more. And so in working that field and then doing what I was in college, I came to the conclusion I really needed to work in golf course construction. And so between my 4th and 5th year, I went to work for McDonald and Sons, who are a golf course renovation builder that are located between DC and Baltimore. And Chip McDonald, the owner of the company, really allowed me to see an entire range of what's out there in building golf courses, and then also to a certain extent designing them. And when I finished that summer, not long after, he offered me a full-time job when I finished at the end of the following year. So I went to work for him and worked for 14 years designing and building golf courses for McDonald and Sons. And then in 2014, I decided, looking at the landscape, that there was an opportunity for me to do my own thing, and took the leap of faith. And the rest is history, I guess.
That's incredible, especially with everyone doubting you and telling you can't and just sticking to it. That's just awesome to hear. Like you said, your brother was a Hokie. I'm curious, sort of as a fellow Hokie family, my brothers and sisters went to Tech. What was it like to sort of have that Hokie atmosphere and the Hokie, what it means to be a Hokie and whatnot? And how was Blacksburg for you as a student? Sort of just to give the kids an idea. It really hasn't changed too much. Obviously, it's added on a bunch, but again, it's still the same tradition, and what's born and bred in Blacksburg. Could you sort of give that idea of what that experience is like?
Sure, absolutely. So I grew up north of Roanoke, about 15 to 20 minutes, maybe a little more north of Roanoke. So I could go on back roads to Blacksburg and be there maybe 45 minutes, maybe an hour, or down Interstate 81 south and about the same. So I was close enough to home to, if I ever needed something, I could find my way there. My parents could come down. That was a cool, I guess, part of it. But the real reality is, once you were in Blacksburg, you're in this kind of tight-knit community that's really unlike anything else. From a college town standpoint, being in such a, not necessarily remote, but you're kind of off to yourself to a certain extent. And so you build a real camaraderie with every single person. Moving in, I lived in Pritchard Hall my freshman year, which was at the time one of the largest all-male dorms east of the Mississippi, and it was wild. The things that might happen. I remember one night some guys set a trash can on fire inside the elevator. I mean, just crazy things, not trying to scare off parents out there.
Classic Pritchard.
Yeah, right.
I heard
So,
stories about a sofa on fire in the courtyard, but that's the elevator sounds fun, Jeez.
yeah, good times. And then, it's this, I met my wife at Virginia Tech, and we kind of still chuckle today about walking across the drill field as a freshman, living on campus and walking across that vast expanse, especially on a cold winter's day. And, sometimes you can tell the difference between, a freshman or maybe even a first semester student versus someone that hasn't been there or has been there a while by walking across the drill field. The people that are looking down at their shoes versus the people that are looking up and saying hello to others. It's a pretty interesting transformation. And then just being there, you just build such great relationships by being next to your fellow students. In the general classes, you are going to have classes where there's a lot of kids, in a general math class or maybe a biology class or whatever. You might have a couple hundred students, which is a little overwhelming, especially for a kind of a smaller town kid like myself. But then you also have your kind of the classes wherever your journey leads you, whatever major you might be looking at. You'll get to some smaller classes where, the people beside you have some of the same dreams that you have, and building those relationships with those people, there's nothing like it. You'll share that with those folks for the rest of your life. And it helps you kind of find yourself and figure out what you want to do in life. And then looking back on it, I have a group text with a group of, I don't know, 8 to 10 friends that I text probably 4 or 5 times a day, and they're all Hokies. We stay in close contact. And the person, probably my best friend that I talk to as much as anybody, is a Hokie. And so, it's a lifelong thing. And then, of course, to be a part of the athletics and the pride behind that is certainly awesome. The tailgating atmosphere for football, the Castle Coliseum, great place for a basketball game.
They're doing good. They're doing good. Last night.
No,
we're a basketball school. Exactly. Yes. Now, man, football's killing me. But hey, I'll take basketball, especially because UVA, since they're a basketball school. I'm just saying, UVA, you better watch out.
Right. Yeah, so it's I wouldn't change it for the world. I had some other opportunities coming out of high school that I evaluated briefly, but it was the right place for me.
So if you could explain to us a little bit about your educational background and what aspects you learned along that road that really help you understand how to construct a golf course.
Yeah, it's a great question. There's a difference between kind of book smarts or learning and real world, what's out there in the field. And I think one of the great things about the program that you all are involved in is you're seeing the combination of knowing why things are done and then how to do them. And that combination is incredibly powerful. And I would say something that's helped me more than anything else in knowing that not only what I'm doing, but why those pieces, how they work together, why I'm doing certain things. And, from a landscape architecture perspective, the grading class, learning how to move dirt with lines on a paper, that was huge. Drainage concepts, trying to figure out how water moves. It's amazing. Obviously, water goes downhill, but there's a lot more to it. And trying to figure out how to move water gracefully is a big part of what I do on a daily basis. So that was huge. From a turf standpoint, every turf class I took allowed me to understand how the product I created was going to be maintained. And through that and through working in golf course maintenance, seeing that real side, taking that the knowledge learned in school and applying it certainly has helped. woody landscape plants, learning about all the different trees and shrubs and all that plant material stuff. I certainly use that on a daily basis.
Talk about
It
difficult
can be a
class.
little overwhelming at times when you're learning, dozens of plants at a time. I actually was an undergraduate TA for that class. That's a long story for another day. But yeah, it's trying to do winter identification, right? True.
Oh my goodness. Woo. Look at all
Trying
the pretty
to
leaves. Now know what the tree is when they're gone, you know?
nothing like having your professor stash a few leaves from the wrong plant underneath, just to make sure he's keeping you honest.
Nice
But
guy.
yeah, I mean, those were a couple of the things. Yes, absolutely. And then, the craziest thing I use that I have 3 kids, and my oldest is in high school and actually taking geometry right now. And I use the Pythagorean theorem to lay out rectangular tees all the time. And I kind of chuckled to myself about how, those one of those things for sure. I sat in high school geometry class and thought to myself, when in the world am I ever going to use this stupid formula? And here I am building a golf course for people to hit a little white ball around. And sure enough, I use it often. Now with smartphones, though, there's an app for that. If you didn't know, I'm sure you guys did.
I think the virtual learning right now, I think everybody's found all the apps, to be honest with
Right.
you. Oh man, that's great. So sort of to go into that, something that I've always found super interesting, and it has to be perfect no matter what. Site analysis is critical to any kind of construction, from skyscrapers to homes. But in golf course architecture, I feel like it's so much bigger than that, because even just one hole, there are so many components that go from the tee box to the green, and even just the green itself, there are so many components. Could you give the kids sort of an idea on how you come up and construct in your head the site based on the analysis you made for not only just one hole, but I mean, you have 18 holes or 9 holes, whatever the construction is. What is that process like for you specifically as the architect?
Yeah, so a huge part of what we're doing now is using some technology, updated aerial photography, drone footage. I mean, heck, even my smartphone, to be able to walk a golf course or a property and record information that then when I'm sitting down to do the hard work of design, that I have a lot of resources at my fingertips. So aerial photography is probably the number one thing we utilize. There's services now where you're getting updated aerials multiple times a year. So it used to be that I would have an aerial that might be 5 to 10 years old, and I'd have to walk a property and update the aerial to see if trees had fallen down, or if it was an existing golf course, things that had changed before I even got there. In the meantime, now with the updated technology, that's certainly helped. Topography is huge. Understanding where the low is, where the highs are, where water's moving. Again, that's super important. Understanding the sight lines across the property. And when you're routing a golf course, it's really important to understand, when you're standing, excuse me, in one point and you're playing to another, what's the presentation going to represent? How much dirt has to be moved to make it work? There's a lot of that goes into the design of a golf course. And then soil conditions, that's a huge thing. Soils classes, if you, in college, the soils classes can be a little monotonous, to be honest. You're just talking about dirt.
Was Dr. Daniels there when you were
It's
there?
important. Yes, sir. Absolutely.
Oh my
Yes.
goodness. You want to
Yeah.
talk about a fossil. Great man, don't get me wrong. But he's been there forever from what I've heard.
Yes.
And he has the
Yeah.
stutter. I
And
feel
he
so bad for him.
loves dirt.
He does. It's crazy. And it's funny
Yeah,
the
that's true.
stories he
Yeah,
said about
he does.
going to China and going and doing all these different things for different countries. I'm like, wow, this is insane how much you can do just with soil, you know? Sorry, I was just curious if he was still there when you were there.
No, yeah, Lee was there. Yeah, took his class. And then things like soil fertility and all the other components, soil taxation, right? You remember that one, Drew?
Oh yeah.
So that's the whole, I don't know if you how much, do you guys do that at all at your school?
We do some soil stuff, whether it's just going over the textures and whatnot and actually out in the
Yeah,
field. Soil testing,
that's great.
teaches them how to read it and whatnot. But we don't go too far into it because I don't want to make it too difficult, you know.
No, I got it. No, for sure. But I mean, for the class, there's a whole class in understanding how different soils can be classified and named. And when even just learning the basics, you can quickly understand how landscape position, meaning where on a property a piece of ground lays, it can give you a clue, just the property, just where you are, not even digging a hole. You can have a sense of what the dirt looks like underneath, which is pretty cool. And then, from a soil standpoint, a golf course like yesterday, I was on a call with Bayville Golf Club down in Virginia Beach, and we were talking about they moved 400,000 yards of dirt when they built the golf course originally, and it was a flattish dairy farm. And so now the soils are different. Different areas receive different soil when they dug the ponds, and so that's something I certainly have to take into consideration. And then sunlight. Sunlight's a huge thing. Existing golf courses and any kind of new construction or new holes, you have to take into account where the sun rises, sets, different times of year. And there's some great technology that helps us see that, whether it be an app on your phone where you can see where the sun's supposed to be at different times of the year. That's huge. Grass needs sunlight to grow and air movement. So those are some other things, I guess, from a site analysis standpoint. Oh, I guess I should say water source is the most important of all. You can't have a golf course without some sort of water source. We're doing a better job of finding ways to, have golf courses that are more sustainable using less water. But at some point, you have to have wells, an irrigation pond, river, something to have water.
That sounds incredible. And I want to sort of talk about something you were just talking about. You said you've been doing this for quite some time, and before these apps and before everything that has sort of made life a little bit easier, I'm sure. What has it been like against a golf course architect's standpoint? How has technology advanced? How have you seen it adapt to the way you do your job? Even from, I mean, smartphones haven't been around since the 90s. So, I mean, like you're talking about how you recorded different things walking the course and whatnot. How have you seen it grow in your time in the industry?
When I took pictures and we're lucky to have a 1 hour, photo development thing. I'm sure your kids can't even wrap their head around that. But yeah, services building over up by the old chicken farm. There was a building up there where I got my film developed in college. And so that's, very simply, that's something that's really changed. Um, Measuring and survey equipment, huge change. When I started, the most complicated thing we typically had in our toolbox was a laser, a grade laser that basically shot one plane with a laser, and then you had a receiver on a rod, and you would shoot elevations and then have to manually record them on a piece of paper. Today I can take an existing Greene and run a piece of equipment over it or scan it with LiDAR, and I can have a point every, half inch apart of the grades on that Greene, and I can replicate it back exactly the way it was that we could have never done even 15 years ago. So that's been huge. Construction equipment, both from a compact, smaller equipment with a lighter footprint, meaning, not destroying things that are running across grass, out on a existing golf course. That's huge. If any of your students love running equipment, the tilt bucket on an excavator, I get lost sometimes on Instagram. I'll watch, especially the guys in the UK
The
where they're grading
perfect,
something and
the
going
perfect
nuts.
like left and right, and they just
Yeah,
everything they want is perfect. And I'm like, I would have screwed up after the first one,
yeah, for sure. But it's like it's almost an element of video gaming, right?
Exactly.
It's a very similar skill. So that piece of equipment, I think, is one of the biggest changes for me to actually replicate older work. Is that knuckle bucket or whatever, that swivel, whatever you want to call it, on an excavator, because it allows you to create the same illusion or feel to earth moving as an old horse and plow scoop. Because if you look at an old picture of a horse and plow scoop, the dimensions of that versus the dimensions of these excavators are very similar. So you can do some really cool stuff and make your shaping, the way you're moving the dirt, look older. So yeah, that's a great use of it. And then AutoCAD, I was at Virginia Tech. I was the last class in landscape architecture that had pretty much zero AutoCAD experience. The professors at the time really felt that they didn't want their students being draftsmen that didn't get to learn the abilities to critically think and come up with design ideas and be maybe, I don't know if more well-rounded is the right term, but CAD is a huge thing. I started having to draw. Gonna sound like an old man here. I started drawing on Mylar, and I was starting with some early plans for golf courses that were completely drawn by pen on paper, and that's come a long way. So my tablet, I draw. If I'm drawing anything right now, pretty much it's on my tablet, and it gives you a similar feel and warmth to your drawings, but it's all digital.
And so, sort of segueing into the design phase of everything, the site analysis obviously helps you with what your limitations and your parameters are. What is the design sort of process for you? What is it that you're trying to create? Obviously, you're creating the environment for the turf grass and other plants to thrive, but obviously you're a golfer, as you said. What is it that you're doing in your design to create that sort of hole and make it unique in a sense, so that it's what they're looking for in their new golf course or hole, whatever you're reconstructing or constructing?
Each project that I'm working on currently there in DD was a case of the routing pretty much stayed the same, but it was a brand new golf experience from the first tee to the last green. And then there's historical things where I'm referencing stuff from history and trying to honor original architecture, restoration stuff. And then there's projects all between and new golf construction and all kinds of different stuff. But I'd say, my general philosophy with it is I'm trying to create golf courses that are enjoyable. and want their golf course to be hard. And we have certainly some golfers that just love to get beaten up in the process, sessions about making sure something is still challenging. So enjoyable doesn't have to be easy, but and there's a certain level of challenge to golf that is maybe intoxicating you as quickly as possible, but enjoying it at the same time. And then for everybody in between, I'm really just trying to find cool ways to play and different ways to play golf across the property, and developing a golf course that allows you to play however you are best able to. So if you're a great driver of the golf ball, then you have that opportunity to use that to your success. If you're a great iron player, then you have that opportunity. If you're a great putter, then there's an element of that makes it allows you to be successful. And then, around the putting surface, everybody's headed for the same target regardless of distance. What does that look like? How does it feel? What are the different shots that you could play around it? And as I've studied it more and more, the more I've come to realize that each piece of property is completely unique. And so if you figure out ways to use that ground that you have in those unique ways, then you can create golf that nobody else has, right? Because every golf course is its own deal, has its own piece of ground. It's its own orientation to the sun, its own lows and highs and all those different things. So drawing that out allows you to create cool and interesting golf and make each golf course unique.
That's awesome, especially when trying to be a golfer myself. Sometimes you're always paying attention to different things. We'll just say I'm not great. But when you're doing this process, are there any main concerns or priorities? Obviously, you have the turf grass that you're worried about and the plants. Are there other factors that go into the process of designing, and maybe budgetary concerns or things like that you're really worried about? Anything that you've prioritized in that process would be awesome to know about.
Yeah, certainly. So I like to often think about the optimum solution, the craziest design, the most amazing thing possible, right? And that's kind of over here. And then we kind of have the budget. How is it going to be maintained? What are the factors that are there for long-term sustainability? So somewhere between those two often is kind of reality and where things meet. So understanding how a golf course is going to be maintained, what's the budget of the golf course, what's the size of the staff. You don't want to miss opportunities. You don't want to turn your back on the best golf possible on any project, but you have to understand that, bunkers that have to be hand raked, and having 300 of them on a golf course, and you have 15 people on the maintenance staff, that's not going to work. So there has to be some restraint and knowledge about the way those pieces interact, because at the end of the day, I'm going to look, my project, my work will look the best if it's maintained well and enjoyed. And so understanding that, having enough restraint, I guess, to make sure that what's being designed and implemented works is important. Grass species is a huge part of that discussion. Heights of cut is a huge deal. Talking about, how many different mowers do you have to maintain this golf course? Do you have even the distance between the putting surface and maybe a greenside bunker? You might have putting green height, collar height, first cut height, rough height. And then you might have a mower that has to mow the bunker banks like a fly mow. So now you're talking about maybe a walking greens mower, a triplex on the green, a walking mower or triplex on the collar, the same thing for the first cut of rough. Then you have the primary rough that might be a rotary push or a ride-on rotary deck. And then you have whatever is a very intricate grading potentially. You're talking about 5 different things happening in one small space. So, a question I often ask superintendents when I start working with them is, what are the heights of cut you have between the putting surface and a bunker? Or what are the heights of cut you have around your golf course? You have native grasses or taller turf. And so those all play into the design, and then also the implementation and the sustainability. Equipment usage is something that I try to think about, the difference between triplexing a green and walk mowing a green. What are the difference in the limitations of space needed to turn that equipment? That certainly comes into play. Materials are a huge part of budgets. Bunker sand, greens mix, gravel, all the raw materials, sod, the things that you need to build a golf course, they have to come from somewhere. How far away do they have to come? What's the quality of that product? How consistent can you get it? It's kind of monotonous, I guess, but those are things that are important to the overall product.
And that's great, see, with everything and understanding distance for all that stuff and whatnot. Is really great to have that opportunity to hear about and learn about it. With everything that goes into that, we talked about the site analysis. What is it that with the subgrade and you have the different areas of the golf course, whether it's tees, golf fairways, roughs, could you sort of describe to the kids the subgrade that goes into all that and how they differ from each other?
Absolutely. So often I'll think or say that you can have anything. You can do it any way you want, but you want to do it some manner that works, right, and works for you. So let's talk about tees. Tees can be built out of just dirt, just topsoil, just whatever dirt is on your property, and they can work pretty well depending on the quality of that material and what grass you have on it and how you're maintaining it and that stuff. The highest, probably the higher level tees have 6 inches roughly of mix. So it's a sand-based medium that are underneath the grass. And then underneath that is a series of drainage tile that are interconnected network on roughly 15-foot spacings. The spacing can change some, but roughly that. There's some tees that might even have a foot of material underneath them. Some have even more elaborate drainage systems. Bunkers are some of the most complicated things we build. They're hazards. They shouldn't be that complicated, but they are. Bunkers have an internal drainage system made of drainage, perforated drainage tile that then feeds into your overall drainage system underground. Most bunkers these days have some kind of liner in them. 10 years ago or so, it was mainly some kind of fabric material. Now it's mostly some kind of aggregate, meaning it's some kind of stone-based product. Better Billy Bunker is a stone-based product with a polymer that's sprayed on it, and that's a 2-inch lift underneath the bunker sand. There's things like capillary concrete that are porous concrete that you put in the bottom of the bunkers and a 2-inch lift beneath the sand. And there's a whole range of other things. There's rubber, crumb rubber that's been used underneath it. I mean, all kinds of things underneath the bunker sand. And then bunker sand itself is anywhere from 4 to 6 to 12 inches deep in bunkers. And that sand is typically either manufactured, meaning it's crushed from a larger particle, or mined out of the ground, and can be very expensive. I have a project where it's $125 to $150 a ton delivered. It's a lot of money. When you're talking about maybe even $1 million in bunker sand on a golf course, just the sand. Fairways are typically just the native soils, but there's some high-end clubs that have sand capping where there's a full, like the tees, there's 6 to 12 inches of sand or sand peat mixture on the fairways. And then greens, there was a lot of experimentation about greens construction. I think we pretty well settled on some sort of USGA, what's called a USGA green. The United States Golf Association worked in the 60s to try to set a list of guidelines for good greens construction. And what it is roughly today is 12 inches of that sand peat mixture. So it's a combination of sand, soil, and peat moss, or can be straight sand, but And then that rests on 4 inches of gravel that's washed, very clean gravel. That's 3/8 inch minus. And then underneath that is a herringbone drainage system that can be everywhere from 5 to 8 feet apart to 15 feet apart is kind of the maximum that we want. And then that drainage system ties out to your, either to an outfall point or to your larger drainage system. So it's way more complicated than it appears when you're playing on top of it.
For sure. Now, with everything that sort of goes into that, is the budget what changes the certain amount? So like the cap's smaller or the drains are further. Is it all based off a budget or is it based off something else? And what the club wants really.
Yeah, it's performance. Some of it's performance. You know, a major championship venue that has to perform after even a heavy rainfall. And typically the budgets are a little more, but those are the places where we're most anxious to get the water off the golf course. So the drainage system might be a little more elaborate. And then it's beyond that. It's, you've got to make sure it works, right? You don't want to spend 2/3 the money and have something fail when you could spend the full amount that you need to and make sure it works.
Absolutely. The next thing I want to sort of talk about is probably one of the most complex things, and for me to know and understand it. What is it with irrigation systems on an 18-hole golf course that make it so complex? Is it just because of the overall size of it, or is it because it's just the way that it's set up? Or could you just give an idea of how, with us on our athletic fields, it's very simple with certain zones in a certain way, and with all the different topography and all the different ways the golf courses are oriented, how does that impact how you lay out the irrigation for that course?
Great question. So most of the times I rely on my fellow irrigation designers, you know, the guys that do that primarily as their business. But I'll give you at least my shot at it, Drew. If anybody has, if I misspeak, I'm sorry, but it has a lot to do with the idea that you know, individual head control is something we're really striving for on most golf courses, meaning that we want to be able to turn a sprinkler on and off by itself. You know, when I started, that was a pretty that was a rare thing. You know, block systems where you're turning a valve in 4 heads or 6 heads or however many heads are coming on was much more common, and maybe something you might see, like you see in athletic fields. For golf courses, having individual head control is huge, because if you had a fairway where the valve's here and the fairway slopes down, and that valve were to come on and the heads along the line from that were to pop on at the same time, well, the head at the high end running the same time as the head at the low end, you would have to run the head that's highest elevation longer, and that water would want to get downhill, and then you'd be wet on the bottom and still potentially dry on the top. So that was a huge reason for this individual head control. And then it's all about your water window, meaning that your pipe sizing and your pump station support how many heads can run at one time. And if you have, you know, 250 acres to water, and you're trying to water it in as short a window as possible just before daybreak to try to provide the best turf quality and reduce disease pressure and things. And there's philosophies about that watering practice I'm not going to get into, but just in general, you know, you need to have the supply system to turn on as many heads as you need to run through. The cool thing is, with the computer systems and control packages that are out there now, the computer can tell you kind of what your water window, how many heads you have on. You can turn heads on and off. You know, if you have a dry area, you can turn that head on longer. If you have a wet area, you can turn that head off completely. So it's, you know, it's being more site specific. And then in reality, it uses less water. You'd think more heads, more control, that would mean more water. And in reality, it's less water because the water is targeted.
Absolutely. with your degree in turfgrass, you have worked all over the country with different regions and different aspects of what turfgrass management is. Could you sort of go through what the process is of selecting the different turf grasses for those different golf courses? I mean, I saw on your website you worked from Shinnecock all the way across the country in California. What would be the process of selecting the turf grass for you, or is that someone else's job? Just sort of how that goes into golf course architecture.
Yeah, I think in large part, I'm relying on the golf course superintendent to help select grasses. At the end of the day, that's the person that has to come up with a game plan and have the staff to maintain it. So in a large part, they're the ones that are really driving the bus when it comes to grass selection. I certainly will help voice an opinion or show things I've seen, discuss things I've seen. And then a lot of times it's really what is best for the region in which you're working. And then comes this idea of trying things. You know, it's great to try things and be successful. It's awful to try things and fail and fall flat on your butt. So, using tried and true materials and grasses, it has a certain safety factor to it. So you always have to balance that. You don't want to be behind. You don't want to install a grass that then you feel like is behind where research and technology is moving. But you also don't want to put your neck out there where you're putting something in the ground that you think will work, but you don't know. And so a lot of times you're looking at sod farms in the region, what's available. You're looking at seed suppliers. You're looking at your neighbors. You're talking to fellow superintendents and architects and people doing work of what's working for them, what they've seen. That plays into it as much as anything.
Now, there's an even bigger like component to everything, especially for you coming into a club or coming into a course that's not really what your home. You're an outsider, sort of them. You have to work with certain groups, whether it's the superintendent, whether it's someone who is a part of the Greens committee. What is that sort of like client business relationship like for you as the architect? I know a lot of superintendents talk about how they want to sort of make the members happy and whatnot and have to deal with that. How is that for you in a sense? If it's more just a Greens committee, whether it's the superintendent or any of that, what is that process like with you, especially throughout the construction of the golf course?
It's a great question, Drew, and it can be different things. Every club has kind of its own governance or the way it operates, and you have everything from a single owner golf course that's maybe a daily fee where that's the one person you're talking to, all the way to a county golf course or a municipality where there's a board of directors that are at a super high level that really they don't have day in knowledge of the golf facility, but they're making the decisions of what's getting done. That's a totally different thing. Most of my work is with private clubs, and most of them have some sort of green committee, golf committee, or board that I interact with on a regular basis. Some clubs have really cool like architectural committees where they pull people from different aspects of the club to work with me, and they all kind of end up in the same spot. And that the real key for me is that committee has to give me context. If it's somewhere between 5 to 12 people, most of the time it can be maybe 20. But let's say 5 to 12 people, and those 5 to 12 people have to represent 300 members, 400 members, however many members there are to a club. So I need a nice cross section in that committee to let me know what people are thinking. I really try to work along the process to know that before I stand in front of 300 members, that I have a sense of what they're thinking, what they're feeling, the questions they're going to ask. That's huge for me to communicate. And I'd say the thing I picked up most along the way, maybe even in high school, that didn't register at the time, but is something that I think your students might value, is trying to be a good listener, trying to look people in the eye, truly listen, ask good questions. Even if you disagree with that person or you have a stance that's the opposite of theirs, you ought to at least respect and understand where they're coming from. And the more you can do that, the better served you're going to be. And whether you go on to be a golf course superintendent or a landscape contractor or a school librarian, understanding, listening, and being an effective communicator is the number one key. And it's not easy. You can be nervous. It's part of the deal. The more you do it, the better you are at it, but it's hugely important. And I know that sounds cliche as can be, because I've seen my kids roll their eyes at me when I say it. But.
Absolutely not. That is one of the most important things that we try to teach here, because you never know what you're going to miss, and you never know what you're going to learn in any situation, really. It's definitely something to take to heart in any situation, whether it's math class, whether it's this class, whether it's your parents. It's always important to hear what is going on and who's really giving you knowledge that will take you far in life, So it's definitely something that we as a class should definitely be listening to. You hear that, Zach? Be a good listener. Just saying.
Hey, I listen to music all the time while I'm working too, so I'm not trying to get Zach on.
Yeah.
Now, with such a large scale project like a golf course, how difficult is it to budget out everything, and how difficult is it to budget what is the most important to construct?
That's a great question, Rylan. My biggest fear ever is to give a number early or whenever it's time to give the number, and when we get to do the work, I'm off. I mean, it is sleepless nights, pit of your stomach. It's a concern to think it's going one way and end up another. I try to use what I call kind of unit. It's in the industry, not just me. In the industry, a unit price contract. And basically what that means is I divide the golf course down to its smallest piece, and the piece that the contractor or builder is going to use to send her an invoice that then the client's going to pay, the owner, club, whatever. And when I break it down into those pieces, then I try to keep track of that with my CAD program. It's scaled off, right? So I'm able to draw what the green's going to be. I click a button, it tells me how big it's going to be. And then I translate that into an Excel file that then allows me to calculate all the units of different materials that are going to go into that green. And then that allows me to build a budget. And so if you've seen the movie Patriot, which is, it's like a black and white movie to you guys now probably, but when I was your age, it was pretty fresh. But the line in there of aim small, miss small is huge. And so when it comes to budgets, I try to aim small, miss small, meaning that try to be as accurate as I can up front. And then it leads to smaller misses. In a contingency, that word, I don't know how much you cover in your class, but yeah, a contingency basically is a percentage or a dollar figure that you put in a budget for unforeseen things. So whether it be you're going to dig a bunker and all of a sudden you find a rock, or you find an old well, or whatever it could be, that contingency fund, the extra dollar amount in your budget helps you stay on track.
So we had talked back in January. I think it was January. It might have been a little later, but you had just been working on the reconstruction at Congressional Golf Club, right down the road from where we're at here at Brentsville, which we were hoping to visit before COVID hit, and that was fun,
It's been brutal.
It's been insane. I can't even understand it, honestly. What is it, the process of sort of being selected and going through a process to be the architect to be the head choice for the bidding process?
Yeah. You're saying from the construction process, Drew, or how they selected me?
So how did they select you specifically? Sorry.
Yeah, so no, that's all right. I just wanted to make sure I was answering the right thing. So typically the interview process, again, can be kind of varied. There can be a phone call one day that says, hey, we want you. Will you come to our golf course and let's figure out how to make it happen? And then there's RFPs, which is a request for proposal. I get a lot of those. I have a couple sitting here actually in my inbox right now. And basically that is kind of a form a club will send to multiple architects, and you fill out your information, your client list, things you've done, your interest in their project, maybe some things that you see, opportunities you see. Then the next level would be like an on-site interview where you go walk the golf course with a series of folks from that golf course. Most of this is renovation work, okay, not new construction. You meet with the golf course superintendent, the golf professional, the general manager. You know, you try to, in my mind, I'm always trying to look for a great team to work with. That's most important to me, way more than anything else, is to have a fun group to work with and a group that has a common goal. And then it can go to formal interviews, which would be either a set number of questions or a presentation of your own making. I've probably received more jobs from my interviewing skills than anything. And I try to show, if I'm excited about a project, I'm going to show the club how excited I am about that project. And I'm going to show whether it be research or design ideas or things that I see as opportunities, and try to show them that, hey, I'm excited about potentially being part of your team. I want to be here. And I think that served me really well. And so, yeah, it can take different ways to get there, but that's kind of the process. I think at Congressional, it was, there were some unique circumstances there, but I think, you know, there was like 30 some architects at one point that were in the mix, which is kind of crazy.
That's awesome. That's crazy. What is once you've gone through just making a left turn here. Once you go through the process of like bidding and being selected, and like you said, 31, that's awesome. What are the first steps of the construction aspect? Whether it's, let's say it's reconstructing a Congressional. What were your first steps when it came to the reconstruction of it? Was it clearing everything out? Was it sort of using the material that was there and then creating around it? How do you go about the actual physical aspect of your job?
Okay. Yeah, so I guess we skipped over a little bit of a step of permitting, which I don't want to spend a lot of time on. No, it's all right. It's all right. But that's something that the students should be aware of. You know, any land disturbance over 5,000 square feet in most areas on the East Coast will generate a potential land disturbance permit. Some of your work can be considered maintenance and doesn't trigger that permit. But for the most part, any major land disturbance, like a Congressional was 160 some acres, you know, that we needed a lot of permitting, and then the permit actually drives the schedule. So, you know, it'll tell you kind of the sequence that you have to kind of work in. For the most part, it is tree removal and demolition would be the first step. You know, clearing the site, getting it ready to work. And then huge believer on most properties to strip the topsoil. That's kind of a big thing of taking the top 4 to 6 inches off. And then you're grading all your dirt and then putting that material back down. The idea is that you've got sustainable medium to grow grass on when you're done. Salvaging any materials you can, recycling cart path material potentially, bunker sand. At Congressional, we use the bunker sand to top dress the native areas. We use the cart path material for our staging compound to drive construction vehicles on. So those are some of the first steps.
During the process, and when you get from, again, what you're saying, stripping everything down to the skids and then starting to establish everything, what are some of the biggest hurdles that you face? Whether it's weather, whether it's maybe different aspects that maybe you have to bid out for larger things, maybe equipment failure, stuff like that. What are some of the biggest hurdles that you face when you're actually putting your plan into place and getting to that final product?
Yeah, from an architecture perspective, I'd say anytime you're anticipating sight lines on paper, you're taking a little leap of faith that the sections you're drawing and the work that you're doing on paper will produce what it looks like, what you hope it looks like in the dirt. That's probably the biggest thing that you're trying to work on. And then from that design standpoint, if you've miscalculated what you think it's going to look like, then you better have enough in the budget to make it the way you want it to be. So there's a little bit to that. Rock is everybody gets nervous with rock. Great story about that. The Country Club of Virginia, we just did a large practice facility at the James River Clubhouse, which is out on the west side of Richmond. And we were lowering the high point and taking that dirt and putting it in the low so that we could create a better practice facility so you could see golf balls land basically at 100 yards. And we had no idea that underneath the existing tee was a line of rock. So we had to incur the cost of removing that to then be able to build what we wanted to. So the rock is always a scary thing. If you look at irrigation contracts, there's always a rock clause in irrigation installation. And then wet conditions, the weather, schedule, huge. I've spent the last couple days doing contractor interviews at Bayville down in Virginia Beach, and we've been talking about what's our window for construction, what's the anticipated weather. I had a builder yesterday had the rainfall chart out, and he read off how much rain annually or whatever monthly could be anticipated. It was a brilliant move, something to really think about. So weather is certainly a deal. So when you're working in the environment we are with living things, your growing season, whether it's trees, grass, whatever, farming, whatever, your growing season, that's it. Mother Nature's undefeated. It's going to turn cold in the winter. It's going to, maybe have tropical storms in late summer. There's things that are going to happen. So you need to hit your grassing windows and understand where the risks lie. And so, seeding greens around here, we want the seed on the ground by September 15th in most places so that bent grass can germinate and grow. So you're constantly working around those things.
I think we need to make a t-shirt, Mother Nature's Undefeated. I think you'd sell a lot of those.
Yeah. Do it. I'll buy one. I want a hoodie though.
No, yeah, of course. With everything that you've done, some of the most incredible golf courses in the country, from Oakmont, again, I said Shinnecock before. It's just so impressive with everything that you've done and where you've worked, Congressional, all of that. What has there ever been one course that's been most memorable? And what is it like for you as a golf course architect to be able to walk back out after maybe like a year or two after you finished your reconstruct or construction, whatever it is, for you to walk back out and see your work and seeing the golfers play on it and how they love it and stuff like that? What is that feeling like?
Yeah, it's hard for me to pinpoint one project that stands above the others. Certainly Inverness Club in Toledo has a special place in my heart, mainly because it was, they took a huge leap of faith in me. Oak Hill, very similar. And the product, both those products turned out so nicely. I'll tell you, I don't know if it's every architect or if it's just me, but I'm a huge critic of my own work. So some days I can show up on a project and I'm looking at stuff that either I'm doing currently or I've just completed, or maybe it's been done for a while, and I'll look at it and I'll be like, man, I wish I could do this or that, or, do I want to change anything, or do I, it's funny. Some days things just don't look great to me. And then some days I'll show up and the same things that bothered me before I'm great with. I'm just like, I can't believe we created that as a team. So I don't know if that's me being mentally challenged or what, but that's certainly, to be honest, that goes through my head. And I hope, your students realize that that's just part of the deal, that it's not a stream of perfection. And it is funny though, as much as I'll be, early in my career, I remember not sleeping at night over a sand line. I'd painted a bunker edge, and it was driving me nuts. I didn't like it, and I'd toss and turn all night, not sleep a bit over a silly bunker line, and I'd get up early the next morning and go wherever it was and fix it. That's I don't know if that's great or not, but it's pretty amazing when I go back to look at the places I've worked. I hardly ever see those things that drive me nuts in the moment. When you're in the heat of it, your mind's constantly racing. You're constantly trying to produce the best product. And, for me personally, I'm driving myself to do that. And at the end of the day, you go back and you look, and I can't really think of much instance where it's not, wow, I can't believe I got that opportunity. I'm from a little town in nowhere, Virginia. To have this opportunity is pretty awesome.
Have you ever had the opportunity to collaborate with any other architects? And if so, how was that experience? What was that experience like?
Yeah, out on my own, Rylan, I haven't really done a lot of that. I have a special project that I called some people together to look at. It's a new golf course. I'm not sure it's going to happen, so I don't know where that would lead. I would say that I picked up quite a bit along the way working at McDonald and Sons. I did some work along, for or along other architects, not really me expressing design philosophies to them, but more following direction. And I tell you, that was an interesting experience because I never really had that outside of that connection. I never worked in an office with another golf architecture firm, and learning, how people acted in the field, how they treated others, how they managed potential problems, how they saw, how they translated their vision into a communication piece that allowed the operator to shape the golf course to their vision. There are so many different ways to do that communication piece. So seeing how different architects do that was very valuable. But unfortunately, I haven't had that opportunity in the most recent past. But I would say that if you're a good architect, you're always going to listen to the team around you and try to make the best product. I'm certainly not one that feels that my way is the highway. So I'd say I collaborate on every project with the golf course builder and with the superintendent and the committee, and we work together, and it's fulfilling.
So you have been recognized as one of the top 3 expert golf course architects by Golf Digest, which again, that's even bigger when it comes to, again, not a turf industry magazine in a sense. How much does that mean to you, and how have you seen that sort of develop in your career to this point where, again, you're among people who have gotten the opportunity through whether it's their golf skills or something not related to what you worked for and how you got to where you're at? How is that for you, and to really represent our industry as a whole, and how it's not impossible to do something that is this lucrative and that is this important to, again, a simple superintendent around the country,
Yeah, Drew, I didn't know that was happening. I don't think I knew that was even going to be published until it was out. I think a buddy of mine sent me a picture of that from Inside Golf Digest. So
thanks for letting us know, Digest. Jeez.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty crazy, pretty cool, for sure. It certainly helped me. I struggled for a long time trying to get jobs and interviewing at places where I knew I had the skills and the drive to be their architect, and I didn't have enough experience or project list to get the job. And certainly things like that have helped me get my foot in the door at some really fabulous places. But I kind of always, in the back of my mind, I'm always willing and understanding that it could all go away, and fame can be fleeting at times. And if I have to go back and be assistant superintendent or something, if I had to go start over, I'd go do it, do whatever it takes. And it's been a heck of a journey. I'm having a lot of fun, and I get out of bed early every day to do this, and I typically work late. And it's a lot of fun. So I don't know. That really wasn't an answer, Drew. Sorry.
No, that it definitely was. And you're never, with the work ethic and the time that you've put in, and again, the obstacles you had to overcome, I don't think anyone will ever say that you're going to become an assistant superintendent anywhere anytime soon.
It'd be okay.
But I understand, and that's great, because it is important to understand anywhere in the industry and anywhere in any job. It's not something that you get to and you're good. You have to keep on working. You have to keep being determined in what you're doing. And to go with that, it's just understanding how you can make everyone else around you better. And that's what you do. From everything that I've seen and talking to you and understanding what your job is, it's insane to me. Understanding all the different aspects, and you're going through all the different materials and whatnot. It's crazy, because I would lose my mind. And you're talking about not sleeping, and I wouldn't sleep ever. I'd be like, okay, I messed that up. I need to fix that. And what you do is it's incredible, and it's fascinating to me. So my next question is sort of, with everything you sort of talked about, the evolution, what has changed about your job most from when you first started? Maybe not with your company, but when you first started as an architect, how has it changed? What's the biggest component that's changed from then until now?
The utilization of survey technology, that piece has changed the most. And then personally for me, I used to spend more time physically building, everything from having a shovel in my hand, operating equipment stuff. That's certainly, I don't have as much time to do that as I used to, even though I really enjoy playing in the dirt. The technology piece, the surveying and that information, I used to have to we'd lay out a golf course by marking out 3 points on the golf hole, a tee location, one center point in the fairway, and one center point at the green. And then we physically pull a tape measure, a 300-foot tape measure, and drive a stake every 100 feet. And then I would physically draw on a piece of paper 90 degrees right or left of that grid of every 100 feet and locate every bunker, every line of disturbance, everything off of that. And now with GPS, we have a handheld unit, and it goes right to wherever that thing is. It's so much more efficient. It's ridiculous.
Thank goodness for technology.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about walking the 300 feet and then just repeatedly 18 times, jeez. When you're creating the blueprint, and this is sort of off topic, and I probably should have asked this earlier when we were talking about it. Do you go hole by hole, and do you just have like a master blueprint with it afterwards, with all 18 or all 9, whatever you're working on? What does that process look like?
I'm going to give you a behind the scene if I don't make anybody seasick here. But so I have multiple monitors in my office. So I've got my laptop that you guys are on, and then I'll have CAD. Not that I haven't been working while we've been talking, by the way, but I had this up before we started. So
totally fine.
Yeah. So there's CAD file, and I can zoom in and out, work around. Typically, I will work in sequential order. On this particular golf course, I actually skipped the first hole because I had some things I needed to figure out with the practice facility. And then I'll pull up historical information. This is an aerial from 1934 of that golf course. So it gives me some perspective of how the golf course was formatted. And then this monitor, which I just got, it's a vertical monitor. And it allows me like easier to write letters and things, but I'll pull up different photos. So sorry, this is a photo, from where I walk the golf course. So then when I'm sitting at my desk, the process, I have a lot of things that I can draw on to actually do the design work.
That's awesome. I love how it's like you have all the different angles lined up, and that's really, it's just cool, especially with the photos from sort of how you build up and you come down to where you are. I think that's incredible. So I'm gonna wrap this up because we've had you on for a really long time, and sorry for the technical difficulties and everything. We ask these two questions at the end of every podcast. Because it's curious to see where everybody goes with their train of thought. If you could, right now, tell yourself when you first started with I forget the name of the company, but first started as a golf course architect, what would be one thing that you could tell yourself to make it a little bit easier on you now, and not now, easier back then, leading up to now?
Yeah, it's probably something in the line of perseverance. I remember a day I put an application and went and interviewed with a landscape company because I didn't think I was going to get anywhere. I was frustrated, and it's hard to see. It's impossible to see your future, right? So you just keep plugging along, and you're going to make some mistakes. Hopefully you have enough success along the way that you feel that you can continue. But I'd make sure I'd tell myself, listen, enjoy the journey and, stick with it. And I truly believe that in all walks of life, slow down enough to enjoy it. Cause I do look back on it and think, man, I just worked and didn't quite enjoy it along the way. And then the other thing I would say is don't put yourself in a box where you only want to concentrate on one thing. Have a well-rounded life, whether it be social aspects, hobbies, or even other facets of what you're learning. Virginia Tech, I wish I'd done a little better job of appreciating all the other things that was happening in my curriculum. I was pretty laser focused for golf, but I picked up enough of the other stuff to help me have conversations and be around other professionals and understand different aspects. But keeping an open mind when it comes to that stuff would just be huge.
That's awesome, and it's perfect. What would you sort of a last type thing, and it's not just turf grass or entering a field in golf course architecture, what would be the best words of wisdoms you could give the kids who are looking right now at going into their futures, whether it's going to college for something or going to an industry or right out of high school? What would be your best words of advice for the kids when entering the real world?
Yeah. I want every person to have the ability to try to live their dream. I've certainly had that opportunity, and I cannot be more thankful to the people that helped me get here. And I know it certainly is a rare opportunity, but that doesn't mean you should ever give up on your dream. Chasing that dream is huge. What's the Old Dominion song? I don't know if you got any country music fans in your class, but chase the dream, not the money. There's a line in one of their songs. I actually went to school with a couple of those guys. But
I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, we have that sign up actually in our kitchen.
Nice.
And so that's huge. And then I watched something recently that I thought was pretty interesting, and I'm going to say this, and I didn't watch the whole lecture, so I might be setting myself up for failure here. But a professor, I think it was at New York, NYU maybe, talked about the algebra of happiness, and in kind of his general gist of the part I watched was that making sure you try to find something that you're good at. And I thought that was very interesting, that was kind of a different take than just following something you're passionate about, but also try to follow something that you're good at. And I think his general gist with that was the idea that if you're doing something that you're good at, you have a certain set of skills that make you marketable. And when you're successful, generally you're happy. And so, think about the things you're good at, and think about the things you're passionate about, and try to, find where they intersect.
I love that, because that really is true. You can be passionate about something, and sorry, sometimes you just are not the best person to fill that position, or baseball player, maybe even. It's definitely something. It's something to definitely be curious and understand everything about. So I want to thank you so much for coming on. What do you guys say?
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time.
Let me